Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. So excited to have you here with us because today we're talking about our Dynasty Startup, Jake. Dynasty Startup 101. We've got a ton of questions to ask ourselves to kind of answer, Jake. And we, of course, are doing the thing that people absolutely love. We're talking about our league because everyone cares as much as we do about our league. How you doing?
I mean, our league is the only league that matters. I don't see why this is an issue for anybody out there. I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic because we're still in the thick of this dynasty startup, and I can't wait to chat about it.
He's lying because it just feels like it's never going to end, Jake. I mean, but Jake, at what point we're going to talk about this? But it really, I'm to the point where I look down the board and I say, okay, we're in what round are we in? We're in round 14. And I'm like, okay, this is good. You know, you're getting quality guys there. And again, we're going to talk about this, Jake. But then I look and I say to myself, 30 rounds of players. Like there has to come a point where I'm looking down depth charts and saying, is this person real? Like you could throw in some fake names and I'd be like, okay, mate, I hope this guy is, on the roster by the time that training camp starts. Like that's how deep you have to go with the dynasty startups.
Yeah, everybody thinks that they have a lot of like sleepers and deep sleepers and deep sleepers until you get to that point in the draft and you're like, I'm just going to draft Julio Jones for the vibes, I guess. So we'll have to see what comes up.
It's so good. I might take a couple guys that are, retired, maybe like a Tom Brady pick just in case, Jake, you never know if he's going to come back. Like that's where we're at with startup. The locker room guys, straight for the vibes. So we're doing all that today though. We've got Dynasty Startup 101. We are going to be referencing the Dynasty Startup that we're in right now, but we've got a lot of key takeaways that we can talk about here, Jake. So let's get into it. Just really starting with the bare bones basics of Dynasty Startup drafts and kind of wondering for you, Jake, what are some of the best draft rules for a startup? We can start with, like I said, the basics, the format, the scoring settings, the length of pick. Like, what does your ideal startup draft look like?
If I had my druthers fully, I would be going super flex, which this league that we're in is. I'd also be going tight end premium. That's just a personal preference on my part. I like to bring the tight ends more into the fold. I feel like they're just they're the forgotten folks sometimes. So I like when you can add that extra, they get a point and a half per reception. Everybody else only gets a point or whatever it is. So I do like that. I also just like, your straight up PPR. Length of pick to me is kind of the least concerning thing. I say that now. Wait until we're on like hour 3,000 of ours, I guess. But, 8-hour drafts make a lot of sense. 8-hour picks make a lot of sense to give people time to not rush and live a life. Be out there living your actual life instead of being just glued to the dynasty draft. If you wanted to do a fast draft, that's fine too. I guess I don't like the in-between. Like, how do you feel about like, okay, it's a 2-hour draft clock as opposed to like 60 seconds or 8 hours or whatever?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't necessarily personally like that. If you are lucky enough though to have a group and you can make your dynasty draft, you start the first kind of like Scott Fishbowl where I've seen people, it's the first, 14 rounds or something. And then they say, all right, guys, we're done. We'll make those picks really quickly. And then they move it over into like a slow draft, right? Where they say, okay, it's going to be but I'm with you. I think if you're going to do a clock, let it be 8 hours because unless you have people that you trust and that are around and don't have, aren't just working all crazy hours. Cause that's the one thing, Jake, when you're starting this league, you want to start it on a good note. So everything, you can look at it and say, oh, well, this is kind of like dramatic, but you want to make sure everyone's happy at the beginning because dynasty from stories that I've heard, it hasn't happened to me, Jake, but dynasty just leagues in general can fall pretty quickly. And it only really takes one person, unfortunately. So just making sure that everyone's good before you start the draft, right? You make sure you send out the leagues, like the league scoring, the settings, all of that. So if people have complaints, like they can say it right at the beginning and then you can make it kind of known because it's always the worst when you're halfway through. And we joke about, our league commissioner, Matt Swing, doing it. And we were like, wait, it's like not tight end premium. It's third round reversal. If I would have read the rules, I would have known that, Jake. But I just said, you know what, I'm fine with it. And so you just kind of have to make sure that it's all out there.
Yeah, I would say that's a great way to summarize it too, is like whatever the settings are, just make sure everybody's on board. That's more important than any
Yes,
specific setting or any specific scoring format. It's just making sure everybody's good with it. If you're not, there's the door. We'll find somebody who is good with it, or you can adjust things. Also, don't need to
exactly.
boot people out immediately, I suppose. But yeah, making sure you're on the same page is vital. I do like the third round reversal now that you mentioned
Hmm.
it. And it's not just because it benefited me in this particular draft. I do actually think there is some science behind like the number one pick overall in Dynasty is so valuable, especially Superflex. Like that's a
Yeah.
crazy valuable pick. So trying to even it out. I don't know if you're ever going to be perfect with it, obviously. Nothing in life is completely fair, but I think the third round reversal where you go in a snake draft, you're going regular and then coming back. And then at the third round, you come back again so that the last person gets the first pick. I think it helps. It helps balance out the value a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it just makes it a little bit more fair. Again, hand up, I complained about it because, of course, the way that we did somewhat of a random draft, like so the way we were able to pick our spots was that we picked a baseball team, we tallied up their scores, all their runs scored from Saturday and Sunday. Whoever had the most was the first pick, and then on and on and on. So I took the Yankees, I got first pick overall, but then that third round reversal, I think you're right, Jake, it makes it a lot more fair. I've heard of people too, if you're trying to make it fair and you have maybe some more sharper players in your league, I've heard of doing just auction startups, which I also, Jake, think is kind of interesting because, again, if you're really deep in the fantasy streets and you love Dynasty and you want a way to like continue to make it fair but make it a little bit more challenging, I think the auction startups are kind of interesting. We obviously didn't do that, but I think that's another way where if you don't want third round reversal and you have everyone, but you have to make sure everyone in your league is good with that, because auction can sometimes be a little bit intimidating. But if you are players that like to have a bit of a challenge and you say, okay, I want an auction dynasty startup draft, that could be another fun way to do it too.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
love
I like that.
auctions in general. It is definitely fair. You know what? I'll end my piece on this. The only thing you should never do in a dynasty startup is determine the draft order based on baseball. What?
Are you
Why
complaining about it
would you
now?
do that to people? Yeah, why would
It
you
was
do
tough.
that to somebody?
It was tough. And then it was tough. I liked it, Jake, because I got to pick the Yankees first and they scored however many
You
runs. So it
picked
did
well.
benefit me. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. But
These people
yeah,
who
it's one of
watch
those
multiple
things.
sports.
I was going to send you a list of teams too when it was your turn to pick. And then I was like, no, I'm just hoping the Yankees win it. And they did. But you got the third round reversal. We're in the very opposite ends, by the way. So if you're listening to this, I've got the 101, you've got the 112, but you did get the third round
Yeah.
reversal. So I was kind of jealous of you there. So, okay, we're going to continue going through, scoring settings, everything that we're seeing throughout our draft, and just some dynasty startup basics 101. Before we do that, though, let's go hear from our friends over at Bud Light.
Hey, you know you're not actually allowed to drink in a beer commercial?
Since when?
You gotta wait till it's done. Oh,
5.
4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's get into the nitty gritty here, Jake. Let's start going through just some dynasty startup draft strategies. And we're going to do that presented here by DraftKings. But again, we've said this, we're going to base this off of our draft that we are doing right now. I'm hoping by the time we continue going here, Jake, that your picks are going to be up so I can see what goes through your mind and we can see, who you're looking at. But just to give, roster settings and all that, it is super flex for us. So just wanted to say that we're not tight end premium. I hope not. Because if you tell me that right now, Jake, I've royally messed up our draft. So I'm really hoping we're not tight end premium. But it does come to the first question here about dynasty startup strategies. And for you, this question is, how important is it to get your guys now? And we've got James Kozak, who's in our league. That's kind of a perfect example of saying hey, I want to go out. I want to get my guys. How important is that to do that, kind of during the startup right now?
Yeah, it's one of the optimal strategies in my view. It's because it's dynasty. This is hypothetically forever or until you're able to trade this person or what have you. But James just said, hey, I got Justin Jefferson. I would love if I could follow that up with Brock Bowers, but I'm never going to get Brock Bowers in the second round, even though it's not a tight end premium league, just because he's the dude. And he said, I'm gonna fish around and see if I can trade up to get him. And he did. Now you have to give up some future equity to do that. He gave up a future first round pick. He moved back a little bit. But like, you want to get your core guys, it's kind of the only way to do it. You can only hope and pray that they fall to you so much. So doing that early, I really like. Now there's a balance with all this stuff. So if you want to go get your guys right away, and again, I advocate for doing that, you're probably going to have to make sure that you mitigate some risks somewhere else down the line. Maybe it means that, hey, I traded up into the first round again. Maybe once we get towards the middle rounds or, round 10, I'm going to scooch back and collect some more picks to kind of fill out my roster a little bit better. That's fine. Do it however you want to do it, but getting your guys, I think, is maybe rule number one in Dynasty.
Yeah, I agree 100%. This is James. We saw James going back and forth a lot. Like who wants to trade, who's willing and ready to trade. And I think that's going to be one of the things in these dynasty startups. If you're about to head into one, is that, you kind of have to make that decision, right? Jake, you say, okay, I want to get my guys. You can try and go in with a plan for this draft, but just know that it's probably going to get blown up by the end of the first round. Like it's never going to be perfect, and you have to be able to kind of pivot when you want. But getting your guys and being willing to trade those picks as well. Like, because obviously James, I don't have it right in front of me, but he traded to get Steph's pick for Brock Bowers, but he obviously gave up a 1 and then some for 2026. So that's the other part of it, is that you have to be comfortable giving up those future picks. And that's one of the strategies. I want to give up my picks now so that I can win now. And you can tell that James is kind of in that win now mode. And I think, everyone going into a dynasty startup, you can say, hey, I'm ready to win now. But sometimes, Jake, when you look down and say, all right, like Steph, for example, he's given up a lot of his first, these 2025 picks. He's given up a lot, and he has a lot of 2026 picks now stocked up. But that kind of for me, when I look at that, Jake, is I say he's okay with not winning this year. He's looking more towards the future. And there comes a point in the draft where you might have to just look at it and say, hey, this isn't necessarily going the way that I wanted. I'm comfortable now kind of giving up my picks to stock up for later.
Yeah, and there's two ways to do that as well. So you can do obviously what Steph did and say, hey, I'm going to try to stock up as many future first round rookie picks as possible. But I will say it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up on this year yet, just because you did not get those really flashy, exciting guys, the young guys. So James said, hey, I'm going to get Justin Jefferson, Brock Bowers, Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, those are guys that are obviously hot commodities, but they're also really young. So he can be playing for this year and next year. But so can a guy like Steph, who traded away all of those current picks, because he can say, I'm stocking up on youth for tomorrow, but in the later rounds where the veterans start to get a little cheaper and, they're not attractive out of the gate, but rounds 5, 6, 7, you get guys like Mike Evans, you grab guys like, I don't know, James Conner, whatever. You can still field a competitive team this year while chasing after 2026. So I think that's a little bit of what Steph did as well. But yeah, to your point, you do kind of have to look at it from the early going and say, how essential are these core guys to me right now?
Yeah. And that's the one thing where, again, it's just like any draft that you do. It's not just dynasty, but you can go in with a plan and you can go in hoping that you know what's going to happen. But being able to pivot on a dime is just as important here. So for anyone that's only listening, like Steph's team right now, did he trade all his picks with you? Am I seeing that right, Jake? Was it just you and him trading
Pretty
back
much.
and forth? Oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah, we've really had some phone calls.
But it's interesting building a team like this because he has a good balance of rookies. Like you said, you've got Cam Ward. Again, this is a super flex format. So he went off and he said, I'm going to get Cam Ward as my first quarterback. He didn't make his first pick, by the way, until the third round. So you get Cam Ward there. You get Caleb Williams, who, again, might have a question mark going into 2025. But he's one where we've talked a lot saying, hey, this could be someone that really starts to flourish flourish now that he has Ben Johnson as his head coach, and everything like that. And you've got Matthew Golden, you've got a young Ricky Pearsall. So you're right. Trading picks doesn't necessarily mean that you're not now looking into 2025, but you definitely have to hope a little bit more, at least with his team right now, like Chris Olave, Ricky Pearsall, Matthew Golden. You hope that those guys have good enough seasons where they can carry you for this year.
Yep. And this is one of those things where you'll have to adjust mid-season as well. If you say, all right, I thought maybe I had an outside chance at still competing this year. Turns out, nope, I really don't. You also don't want to be stuck in the middle. You want to try, because he still has his own future picks. So at that point, you want to be like, all right, I'll trade off these win now assets to people throughout the season so that I can hopefully take a back seat, right? Maybe get my picks to be a little bit better going forward and adjust that way.
And there's another strategy here where we've talked about James picks and just saying, hey, I want to get my guys now. We've talked about Steph saying, hey, I'm good trading away my picks for 2025 to stock up for 2026 and beyond. And then, Jake, we've got you who, again, when I saw this, I said, well, I did this completely wrong, because it was a get busy receiving or get busy dying kind of strategy where you said, I'm going to get all the receivers. And again, I really like this. This is one where being at the 101, I said, I know I want to get my quarterbacks because they're probably not going to come back around. But then looking at your receivers, Jake, and by the way, you're on the clock, so we do get to watch you make these picks. We'll do them at the end, so we'll tease it that way. So you're going to have 2 picks back to back here. So we'll see what you do with them. But what was your strategy, coming in, and how has your draft kind of gone so far?
Well, let me be clear. The way that you did it is certainly not wrong. And if you're looking to field an actual old team out of the gate, you have a leg up on me for sure. But I always look at a dynasty startup, and it is crucial to the timing of your startup. If we were doing this draft in August, I'd probably be a little bit more cautious about abandoning running backs. But in general, I just go, hey, we got 3 months before we have to set a lineup. I just want to draft kind of best player available, right? What you hope your favorite NFL team and their GM do is like, just get the best guy instead of focusing on like, okay, do I have my second running back just yet? Obviously, I punted that as far down as I possibly could. My first running back off the board was Brian Robinson. I don't even remember what round that is. Is that round 10 or something? It was a long time. So I stocked up on just what I perceived to be, the highest quality wide receivers that were there. Tried to make sure, because it is super flex, I'm getting comfortable quarterbacks. I knew I was going to miss out on that first tier, being at the 112. Like, enjoy your Josh Allen, Kendall. All right, savor that. But I had to slum it a little bit, right? I'm taking CJ Stroud. I'm taking JJ McCarthy. I'm taking Jared Goff. None of these guys are all that exciting to me, but should be usable, certainly. And I have some youth on my side there as well. We've talked about JJ McCarthy and how he's going to be the next Patrick Mahomes. That's very clearly going to happen with him. But yeah, it's all about just trying to say, look, I got 3 months so I can make a lot of trades, which is what my emphasis will be, to get my roster startable for week 1.
And I do think it's an interesting go, because you're one running back right now. Again, we're talking through Jake's picks right now. So you've got amazing receivers: CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown to start. Then you got Teteroa McMillan in the 3rd, T. Higgins right after that, Zay Flowers, and then Trey Harris. So like you said, you've got youth, you've got rookies coming in, but then you already have established guys that are going, when we talk redraft, I mean, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown are going top 7 picks in redraft, depending on who you're with. And then I really like your quarterbacks still. Like CJ Stroud, I feel like you're drafting him in redraft right now. He's going around QB 18. You're drafting him at his floor. I just think we're somewhere in the middle from his rookie season to last year. He's going to be right in between that, and hopefully closer to the 2023 version that we saw. But you going out and only having Bijan Robinson, that's an again, that you just mentioned that, but I think that's a really interesting strategy, because you're so good at Bijan Robinson. I wish that was Bijan Robinson.
I had Bijan Robinson.
I know, but looking at that, like, what went through your head there, and why did you say, like, I'm comfortable doing this? Is it just because we're doing this so early and you're comfortable like trading away some things to get better running backs later, or how are you looking at that?
Yeah, and one of the crucial things in doing this startup was kind of gauging. This is my first time playing in a league with almost everybody now. Like,
Mhm.
I've never played in a league with you. I think there's only one other person, Sam Holt, that I've played in a Dynasty League with. So I
Nice.
didn't know anybody's tendencies. What do people favor? What is going to be the aptitude for trading? And as soon as I saw that trade between James and Steph go down super early, I was like, great. I have some windows here where I shouldn't be ghosted, hopefully, on my trade offers going forward to where I need to make those adjustments. But yeah, I have so much time to do that. I don't want to forfeit really good value just because I felt trapped into taking any one position. And I mean, heck, I loaded up on tight ends, and this isn't even a tight
Mhm.
end draft just because at a certain point, I go, that's the best value on the board to me. So I'm going to follow my truth as much as I possibly can for as long as I can. And yeah, hope that the trade's balancing me out the rest of the way.
I love it. I love it. And let me just say this because I have seen, some conversations back and forth when we look on, you do a lot on our Discord and on Reddit AMAs as well. So shout out to everyone on those and make sure you go and join our Fantasy Life Discord because it's amazing. Let me just say this since we were talking about rules and everything, Jake, if you're joining a league, and this is maybe just my preference, and you don't necessarily know all the people, right? I know all you guys, so we're pretty close. We kind of know what we're doing here. If you're making any kind of future first round pick trades, if you're trading for 2026, I recommend in your league rules to just make sure that they pay their league dues. Maybe get 2 years worth of league dues paid. Maybe put them up in League Safe, I believe is what it's called. So make sure you go and check those out. If you're trading right now and you just, again, don't know the people, just to make it safe and fun for everyone, if you're trading, future picks away, they have to pay next season's fee kind of upfront. That's the only other rule that I really like.
Yeah, the idea being you don't want everybody to trade away all their future assets to try to win this year, and then they
Yeah,
don't win this year, or they do, and they're like, well, my team might suck now going forward because I abandoned all my other future picks. I'm out. And then you have to find
exactly.
somebody to take over that terrible team. So yeah, I think that's a good incentive.
And if you're listening to this, don't do that. Come on, you guys know better than that. You have to stick it out. Like, yes, you have bad quarterbacks, but we can get through this together. We're gonna keep talking about that right here when we're talking Dynasty Startup 101. So that was the startup strategies here, Jake, presented by DraftKings. Let's go hear from them now, really quick. Basketball fans, the NBA Finals are here. The stage is set. The stakes are sky high, and every shot could be the difference between glory and heartbreak. There's still time to get in on the action with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll take home $300 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using my promo code Fantasy Life. The crown is yours. All right, Jake, continuing on through the Dynasty Startup 101. Of course, we're talking about our draft because everyone cares about our Dynasty League. Just like us, everyone wants to know what's going on. So I had the 101 pick, you had the 112. I think this is a good point to kind of ask where your favorite place to draft is in Dynasty Startups. I know that usually you're not going to have an opportunity to pick. We again did the baseball draft, so we picked a baseball team, however many runs they scored on Saturday and Sunday combined, got you that pick. But if you had a choice, Jake, like where would you like to be? Let's say it's the same rules as us, super flex, third round reversal. Where would you want to be in that draft?
In Superflex, I would ideally like to hit those first four spots if I can, because the value of those top four quarterbacks, and this is all going to be dependent on where you value these guys individually. What are your positional tiers? But I have four quarterbacks at the top where I go, if I get any single one of them in Dynasty, I'm going to be absolutely thrilled. That's your Jaden Daniels, your Josh Allen, your Lamar Jackson. And for me, Jalen Hurts is also in that tier, and he might not be for everybody. Or you might have Joe Burrow ahead of him, whatever. But at that point, I go, if I don't get those guys, I'd rather be further to the back so that I can load up on multiple picks. instead of waiting. But I will say, Kendall, it's kind of nice to be in a spot. Neither you or I get the luxury of this, but it's nice to be in a spot in the middle where you can maybe mitigate positional runs a little bit too, right? Oh no, everybody's loading up on, these tight ends, and those are the only guys that I want. Maybe that does feel a little more pressurized at the beginning or end of a round to make sure that you get one of them, because it's a longer wait unless you you go crazy like I do and trade every other round.
Exactly. That's what I need to do. You see, now I'm looking at it, Jake, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I should start doing that. And then I look down the list of players we still have left to draft, and I'm like, no, I'm okay. Sorry, Pat Bryant or Jalen Royals. I'm not trading for you in the 15th round. I can't do
say
it.
That about Pat Bryant.
I'm sorry, Pat. Pat knows that I love him. Where I'm drafting a lot of Pat Bryant, but it's a good call out, Jake, because I do agree. In redraft, I think for me, I love the 4 spot. I think 4 is great, but in these dynasty startup drafts, I hate where I'm at. And like you said, unless you're trading out of yours, I probably would have hated where you're at too on the ends, the 101, the 112. It's tough because I tried to guess. Like when we look at my team, I tried to guess. Okay, I'm gonna take Justin Herbert here because I really don't know if there's going to be a quarterback run. And that's the one thing that you have to be careful of is like, okay, maybe there is going to be a run on quarterbacks and I'm not going to be able to get a guy that I want. So you kind of have to guess a little bit and hope and pray that guys come back to you. But to your point about the quarterbacks too, if you like, let's say you like a Drake May, let's say like you like Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud. That's one of those things. JJ McCarthy, even I want to throw out there. Michael Penix is another good one too. If you like the guys that aren't necessarily valued high in Dynasty, you're going to be okay in these super flex drafts because you kind of know you're pretty much safe for at least 3 rounds. Like that's where the CJ Stroud pick came in for you. That's where Cam Ward started to go. So if you're really higher than maybe some of your league mates, especially like Michael Penix here went in the 5th round, you're okay with waiting a little bit. Yes, it's a little bit of a risk to say, I'm going to wait. Hopefully no one takes him. But in a super flex, that's important to know because then you can get, you can stack, really good players, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brian Thomas, Puka Nacua. Those are all guys that you can maybe try and go get and just say, I'm going to wait, even though it's super flex. I'm high on these guys. I want to wait for them.
Yeah, you can wait. Don't wait too long. That was a mistake that I made. That pick, I actually traded out of my 301 and I said, I'm going to move back a few spots and hope that the guy that I want is still going to be there. And he wasn't. Drake May ended up going in between just in those few spots. So there's a big risk to doing something like that. So that's back to the earlier point about what James was doing. Like, get your guys, be comfortable being aggressive in this format.
I think the person that waited the longest was Nando here in this league. He took his first quarterback, which is Dak Prescott, in the 7th round. In Superflex, Jake, I am just not, I am not going to wait that long. That's just my personal preference. But he waited, and then he did a pretty quick turnaround where he got Kyle Pitts. We can make fun of him later for that and talk about that later. But he did go Dak Prescott and then 3 quarterbacks in a row. He got Sam Darnold, he got Jalen Milroe, and he got Tyler Shuck. So he was able to balance out. Yes, Dak Prescott is a little bit older, maybe doesn't have the rushing upside that he did before. Sam Darnold, a little bit of a mixed bag. He was good for the Minnesota Vikings last season, but then the lights were a little bit too bright when it mattered most. He coupled those two with 2 rookies where it's really an unknown. We don't know what their future is going to look like. Tyler Shuck could be the starting quarterback by the time week 1 rolls around. If Sam Darnold isn't good, maybe we see Jalen Milroe in 2025. Yeah. So I think that's important to know too. If you are going to wait, just make sure you have some pretty, not good backup options, but make sure you do have backup options. That's where you're going to have to come back and say, I need to take, 3 or 4 guys just in case my first 2 or 3 don't work out.
I will say, I think we're actually giving him too much credit here because I actually traded for his pick and took Tyler Shuck. His other backup is all the way down at Daniel Jones. We can just go ahead and take a minute to lament that his other quarterback is Daniel.
Maybe he forgot. You think he forgot it was Superflex? He said, "Oh crap, I gotta get going." Yeah, I take it back then. I don't, it's okay. Oh, I missed that. Good Tyler Shuck pick though. I totally missed that. That's a good one.
I didn't want to pass up an opportunity to pat myself on the back. How many of those do you get?
I mean, it's just one of those things. And this is a good, segue into the next question is in Superflex formats to you, Jake, how valuable is it starting quarterback or getting 2 quarterbacks, let's say in the first 3 rounds? Like how valuable is that to you?
Yeah, I mean, I myself did not start quarterback because of where I was at. And again, just feeling like I didn't want to reach that much. If you are in the first half of your draft, though, yeah, ideally, I would love to do what you did and hit two high quality quarterbacks because then you just don't have to deal with it. Now, on the flip side, when you go wide receiver like I did, that did kind of push me a little bit to say, hey, we're going to try to make sure that we don't walk out of the first 5 rounds at least without two starting caliber quarterbacks. So that's my threshold. I would never be able to do what Nando did if it was intentional. Good job, you man. The stomach on you to be able to wait that long, but I personally wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Again, Nando, I was trying to like throw you something out here and just say, yeah, this is okay. Like he went back to back to back quarterbacks, and you were like, no, just kidding. That was my pick. That wasn't his. So I'm with you. I wouldn't wait that long. Jake, how much of you not, like you said, my draft is very different to yours because I had the 101. So as you can see here, I took Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and I just said, you know what, I'm getting him out of the way because I do not know how this draft is. I have not drafted in a long time with you guys, but definitely in a dynasty league, I have not drafted. So I just said, I want to play it safe, get two really good guys. If you go more for your direction, right? CJ Stroud, JJ McCarthy were your first two quarterbacks. Was it really important for you to like by round 15, that's where we're at right now, have two other quarterbacks? Or would you still be doing that same strategy even if you had, let's say one of the top 5 picks?
Once I have my first two, at that point, there's part of me that says, I feel at least comfortable with these guys. The rest of the way, I can still do best player available. I mean, typically because it is super flex, yeah, oftentimes those guys do rise up my board. That's why I ended up with Jared Goff. In a 1 QB format, would never have Jared Goff. But in super flex, a guy like that is your third. It just makes good sense from a value standpoint, which is more of what I'm focusing on there. So I wouldn't say, okay, I definitely have to get 2 or 3 more quarterbacks after that point yet. Again, knowing that at a certain point, I might be able to trade for these guys throughout the rest of the offseason, especially the ones who aren't valued that high, like a Jared Goff or maybe a Tua or whatever. So still best player available after that.
Got it. And I think the only other person that I'm looking at with as many quarterbacks as like, let's say Nando and you, like James Kozak, we can go back to his again. He went out and got Brock Purdy as his first quarterback. Then he came back with Tua Tagovailoa, Matthew Stafford, where again, Jake, if we're talking redraft, we're going to look at this very differently. But, those are quarterbacks where he's got the good young guy that just got the new contract in Brock Purdy and then says to himself, okay, I still, it's still super flex. Hopefully Tua Tagovailoa can, stay healthy for a season because that's still, he's still got solid weapons. Same with Matthew Stafford. Like you still have the Puka Nakuas, the Devontae Adams out there, but just making sure that, again, super flex format. So you want to get your guys, but he's another guy that I wanted to highlight that did wait from his first quarterback pick to go all the way. I believe it was the 10th round to get his second one.
That's, again, a lot longer of a fall than I personally probably could have stomached. But once again, hey, James, just call me. We'll work out some trades and we'll get you bolstered up in QB land.
You're by the way, it's so fun to click on your name in Sleeper because your name goes all over the board. You're like, oh, traded with Steph, traded with James. It's just everything going on here. So I really like that. That's one of the things that maybe I was looking at that should have done a little bit more of. But that brings us to our Dynasty startup, questions that we have. Like this second part is kind of balance on your roster, Jake, and what people should expect or how they should go about balancing their roster between being young and then also wanting to win immediately. How do you look at that and make sure that you're not leaning one way or the other? Or maybe you do lean one way or the other, Jake, and you think it's a good thing.
I can't get myself to say first year productive struggle. I'm not even going to try to win in this first year. I know some people do that. Some people will go into a draft, and I don't know that anybody in our league really did this, but they'll say, hey, I'm forfeiting the first year, knowing that I'm going to just build for the future, and come 2026, 2027, I'm going to be unstoppable. To me, it's like, keep the balance, because it's easy to say that you're not going to be competitive the first year, and then all of a sudden you find your way into the playoffs, and anything can happen in the playoffs. So yes, I like to keep it balanced. You can do that by saying, I'm going to draft super young up top, and then I'm going to take my veterans towards the middle and later round. That's kind of my preference. Or you can just say that I'm going to hit the sort of middle-aged guys almost all the way through. you think about receivers who are 27 years old, 28 years old, and it's still that thing of like, I don't know if I want to take them in Dynasty yet because here's a 23-year-old. Now, I don't know that this 23-year-old is going to be great, and this 27 or 28-year-old already is. So finding the balance age-wise and not overrating youth is also super important to me.
Yeah, I'm with you on the, if and listen, if you draft this way, that is totally all you. But we're talking about our experiences. I can't imagine doing this and being like, I'm just gonna punt 2025. I don't need anything good here. I'm okay with not winning. But I think that's why it's important when you look at these drafts. Like when I went into mine, AJ Brown, I think Jake was one that I took a lot of time on, where I was sitting there and it's round 4, the start of the 4th round, and I said to myself, man, AJ Brown is there. I believe JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigbo was also there. And that was one of the things where it's like, okay, do I go with the talented player that might be a little bit older, but he's in an offense that we love? Or do I continue with youth? I had Garrett Wilson as my other wide receiver so far. And I went with AJ Brown just because I said, I do want youth. I can get it elsewhere though. I went out and got Travion Henderson and then came back with some other, younger wide receivers. Luther Burden is another guy that I got, Keon Coleman, where again, questionable, especially for Luther Burden in the first year, but you can see a path to a good future there, and he's young. But yeah, mixing it up. And same with like Kenneth Walker, Jake. I was sitting there with Kenneth Walker on the board thinking, okay, he's got injury concerns a little bit. He's a little bit older, but we still like the offense. And I think that's going to be when anyone listening is doing their startup, that's going to be probably the biggest questions that they have when it comes time. It's like, oh, Devontae Adams on the board. He's old, but he's good. Tyreek Hill is on the board. He's old, but he's still good. Like, how much do they have left in the tank? And those guys could ultimately be the ones that kind of push you forward while your young guys, maybe aren't producing right away.
First of all, wild for you to be able to get on here wearing your Seahawks hat and say, I proudly chose AJ Brown over Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I'm sorry, JSN.
That's wild to me. No, honestly, I would have done the same because that's the guy at 27 years old or whatever. His life in the NFL is not done. He's not done being productive. I will take 3 years. I'm not saying this is exactly the case for those two players, but I will take 3 years of what I'd say is stud or stud adjacent production over 6 to 7 years of middling production. Yeah, you get longer of it. So what? You're going to be much less satisfied during that time. You're probably going to want to trade him away at some point during that stretch. So again, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen with JSN, but if there were two of those types of players that were comparable on the board, give me the 3 years of elite level production.
Well, and I think that's why it's important, Jake. We're doing this really early, and we kind of know that as a group. It's June. It's June. We started this I believe a week ago, or maybe more than a week ago now, back in May. And that's why I think it's important if you do have a choice, right, to start your dynasty drafts just a little bit later. Because then, if you would have told me, okay, I saw Sam Darnold reps at training camp, and actually he looks really good, and I feel a lot better about that offensive line, then maybe that question would have been answered for me, and I would have said, yeah, you know what, even with my Seahawks hat on, I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I need to go out and target JSN. He's going to have a monster season. I want him in Dynasty more than AJ Brown. So again, it all comes down to preference. And I do not mind when we started because it just worked for everyone. But if you are able to push it back, we get a lot of information in these next coming months, especially once training camps start. Unfortunately, there's always injuries in training camp as well. But when you're able to start to see just the depth charts become a little bit more clear, like for example, the Jaguars running back situation, it's probably going to be a lot more fun to draft a Bashaw Tootin in a couple months than it is right now, where you're like plugging your nose and like, oh man, this is kind of gross. So that's another, not necessarily league rule thing, but that is something that can shift your dynasty startup depending on when you're drafting.
Yeah, I love that you said that because this speaks to how each individual is different in Dynasty as well. Because I love having the offseason and training camp to take advantage of all those blurbs that come out. There's obviously legitimate news and stuff that happens, right, with depth charts, and we can see those pretty clearly. But there's always those random odds and ends blurbs of I'm not going to say Pat Bryant. Let's say Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims looks like the undisputed number one receiver, says Sean Payton. And you're like, there ain't no way Marvin Mims is going to end up with more than 70 targets. So if you drafted Marvin Mims, that's your opportunity to trade him. And that's the part that I love.
Jake, I love the best shape of their life tweets. Like, inject those into my veins. Like, he's in the. I can't wait. I can't wait. And this is what's going to happen. And we can cut this out of this podcast so we can, clip it. When Travis Kelce best shape of his life tweets come out, and we see him, skyrocket up draft boards. They're like, no, this is his final year. They're going back to the Super Bowl. They need to win it for him, and he's in the best shape of his life. I cannot wait to see where he starts going in drafts. Or Kyle Pitts when he eventually gets traded. Jake, come on, we can't keep doing this. Stop it.
I know.
We can't.
Also, it's going to be wonderful to see when Travis Kelce shaves his head and does the mustache again, to see the value again plummet. It's going to be a wild roller coaster.
Who took Kyle? Oh, it was Nando. Dang it. I'm sorry. We're picking on Nando today. That's his only tight end. Maybe he's hoping he gets traded. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, let's go with that. All right. Jake, another question though. We've talked about trading picks and, hey, winning now to both of us, we've talked about is kind of important, but is it better to trade for future picks in a dynasty startup? How do you go about it? And two, if someone's listening and they're kind of new to the dynasty streets and the dynasty startups, how do they go about evaluating and valuing those picks as well?
Yeah, it's really important when you're dealing entirely with hypotheticals, which is all we're doing, because it's just numbers on a board. That's all we have to work off of when we're in a dynasty startup. And you have to make sure that you're confident in your own analysis of who's going to be there in round 4 of the startup draft. Never mind who's going to be there in round 2 of the 2027 rookie draft. Like, this is all so theoretical. So you have to make sure that you're comfortable with a lot of question marks. But also, I do think, to your first question, like, trading for future rookie picks in a dynasty startup can be super, super prosperous. And I think Steph is kind of proving that. He's already got 3 additional future first round picks and then some. He's acquired some seconds and thirds and all this, and he has plenty left on the plate in this actual draft. So yeah, it can be really productive to do that. I would say, I don't know if it's more advantageous than just trading during the season, because during the season, everybody's so focused on winning, and they're much, in my experience at least, more willing to give up those future picks that aren't going to help them right now. So I might wait a little bit, and rather than focusing on getting those picks in this draft, spread the love a little bit. Wait till week 3, week 7,
Yeah. And I think one of the things coming into this draft is that, trading future picks as well, it can be daunting. Like, it can be a daunting task because, again, if you're not really sure, right, you're like, okay, I don't really necessarily need my 4th round pick, but what's that worth to someone? And it's different depending on the player. So that's the other thing is, like, I've seen a lot of trade offers go out to different people. And so it's like, you might as well just try it, right, Jake, and say, all right, I'm going to try and get this out and see where we're at, because sometimes all it takes is them saying, coming back to you and saying, no, you and I had the same experience. I sent you something and you're like, nah, just can't do it. But it was good to know, like, okay, Jay, this was a little bit too much, but now I know for the future. If this is your first time, again, it can be intimidating, especially when, like you said, you just don't really know the value that it holds for next year. But it can be, kind of fun. It's only you and Steph and James trading. So I feel like maybe we should all get in on it now, but it might be too late.
We're the avid fishermen in this group, obviously. We're just constantly throwing that line out there and seeing if anybody will take a bite. We're building this database, of like, okay, I know what that person expects now.
Are you usually like that though in your startups that you've had before in all your dynasty leagues? Is it pretty active during a rookie startup?
I typically am not this active. I'll be honest. This is more active than I normally am because I'm sitting there at the back of the line, waiting 24 picks in between. So I get a little antsy at that stage. But I do think that this is, you'll typically see at least a handful of trades, I think, in most dynasty startups for that reason, especially once you get further and further back. Like, I think we're going to see way more trades now that we're in round 14 or whatever, because people are looking at these boards and going, I'll take any one of 30 of these guys, I guess, and just punt it.
That's what I'm saying. We're going to get to the point, Jake, where I'm going to message in our group chat and say, this person is not real. This is not a real person. You can't convince me that it is. Like, that's where we're going to get once it comes to round 27 of this draft. There's just no way. I've got one more question for you, because I was going back and forth on this because, again, you're in more dynasty leagues than I am. So do you value your own handcuffs in dynasty? Or is it something where you kind of, when you look forward and you say, okay, maybe I do want future picks, maybe someone is going to want, let's just say I want to get Isaac Garendo because I don't, maybe CMC goes back down. Or, for example, I was in the same situation where I have James Conner, Kenneth Walker, and I had both of their handcuffs come up for my last pick. And I said, man, should I be getting these guys or should I wait? I'm curious what you think about just handcuffing your own players.
I'm probably going to sound like a broken record at this point, but it's just like if they're the most valuable player on the board and they happen to be my own handcuff, awesome, done deal, sign them up.
Okay.
If not, if I go, hey, I want these other 8 guys, I'm just going to pass and hope that I can trade for them later.
Okay. No, that was a perfect answer because that's what I was also thinking. But then I was like, oh, man. And this is where it comes down to, Jake. Then you overthink it and you're like, oh, my gosh, what did I do? I'm looking at this draft. I'm just like, oh, man, it's got to get better than this. Right. But I do like that answer. And I think it's the best. The best player available is usually always the right answer, especially in these dynasty startup leagues. So let's continue on here. We're going to continue dissecting the draft that we're going through right now. You're on the clock too, Jake, which is super important because we get to see your thought process here. Before we do that, though, have to hear from our friends over at Bud Light. All right, fantasy football fans, sure, NFL season may be long over, but next season's action is already well underway. We're talking big trades, new signings, draft order shuffles, you name it, and all this preseason NFL action is easier to enjoy with the official beer of the NFL. So get Bud Light delivered today and enjoy every season projection, every player trade, every coaching change and draft pick with the clean, crisp taste of Bud Light, the official beer of the NFL. Stock up now for the offseason and enjoy. Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Continuing on here through our Dynasty Startup 101 talk. Like I said, Jake, just not that long ago, teased it the whole show, you're kind of on the clock. So before we start and continue dissecting what we've done throughout this draft, who we're hoping to maybe snag here, I'm curious your thought process here. It's the you get to start the 15th round. You traded with Nando because, again, you're just a trading machine, and you've traded almost every one of your picks. But Nando actually was able to get that first pick off. So you've got one right here. Who are you thinking about? You want to make a trade? Should we make a trade while we're on the show? Could be fun.
Jorge actually messaged me in the chat, was like, hey, man, if you want to make a trade, feel free. But I'm looking at this board right now, and I'll let you know my window. And it's still pretty much best player available. But I will say that this chunk of the board happens to overlap with a positional need of mine, which is running back. And I look at what's left, not to give you too many ideas, right? Although you have to wait hypothetically another 11 picks before you even get the next one. But if I'm looking right now, I go, hey, there's a couple of running backs and really only a couple of running backs that I'm remotely interested in here. I think it's going to really drop off after that. So I'm going to politely decline trade requests at this moment. I know that's a shock to everybody after everything that I've done. But I'm going to look at a guy who should hypothetically give me at least respectable production this year and just signed a hefty contract as well. And I'm going to finally take Ramondre Stevenson off the board with 1501. You were lucky enough to get Travion Henderson much earlier. I was hoping I could get Travion. Obviously can't. And I know that he's a way better long-term prospect, but I like Ramondre there.
Yeah, I like Ramondre. Oh, Ray Davis. Dang it, Joe. See, this is the one thing, Jake. It's just, it's not fun when you're at the ends of the draft and you just watch all the guys in your queue just slowly get taken. It's like the worst experience ever. But I do like that pick. Again, we talked about, how important is it to get rookies and some youth on your side, and how important is it to look at guys and say, all right, this guy's a vet. He doesn't have as long as, let's say, a Trey Harris or, a Tedderell McMillan, but he can help me win now. But at this point in the draft, Jake, you kind of said it earlier too. Once you get to maybe not round 15, but once we get to 16, 17, 18, you're just kind of hoping for anyone with a little sliver of upside, and you're just talking yourself into them basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes either dart throws or this guy, or it's kind of modified redraft of this guy's going to do something this year and I know that, or that guy might do something 3 years from now and I'll guess on it. That's basically the question you have to ask yourself.
Exactly. I'm curious when you look at our board, who do you have a draft, obviously besides yours and mine because they're just absolutely perfect. Who else, who else's strategy kind of aligns with yours? Who else's draft have you really enjoyed so far and who you think's doing well?
I gotta say, I know we crapped on Nando, and I get why, but I look
No,
at the receivers that he started with, they're actually phenomenal. Malik Neighbors,
stop.
Marvin Harrison Jr., Romo Dunze. These were all guys last year in our rookie drafts. We were freaking out about all three of them. So if they hold to what they were supposed to be last year and all pick up the pace, it's honestly a great start. But moving off of him, we've talked about him a lot. Joe Metz, I have to give some props to Joe. Started off with Jamar
Yeah.
Chase, Bijan Robinson. He made a trade for Brian Thomas. He got my beloved Drake May, so I automatically had to give him some respect there. Now, I might value some of the other individual players a little bit less than he does, but like the structure of it, hammering wide receivers,
Mhm.
getting at least three quarterbacks. He went back to back with tight ends named Ferguson, by the way. How have we not spent the whole show talking about that?
What the
That's
heck?
incredible.
Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta do
Jake
better
Ferguson, Terrence
hosting.
Ferguson.
Got to do better hosting job. We could have talked about this the whole time, going for both the Fergusons. I think it's a really good call out though for Joe's draft because, like you said, first of all, his receivers. I'm jealous not only of your receivers, Jake, but of Joe's as well. Like you said, he's got Jamar Chase, Brian Thomas Jr., Jordan Addison, Jamison Williams, Chris Godwin. Even though you look at Chris Godwin and some people will be like, "Oh, I'm not going back there at all." Like if this is another season where he was on pace last year to have a phenomenal year for fantasy football, and just it was an unfortunate injury that happened. But then coming back with, we talk about some of the backup running backs or the guys that could get more work if one of these other guys went down. Like he just took Ray Davis was at the top of my queue, Isaac Guerrero as well. So those are solid, depth pieces where, like I said, once we're getting into the 15th, 16th, 17th round, that's really what you're looking for there. So I agree. I really liked his as well. I think I also liked Jorge's draft. He kind of like did, he is 103 right now. So he had Lamar Jackson. He waited a little bit to get Nico Collins, Jonathan Taylor, and I really liked that Jonathan Taylor pick in the third round. And then came back with Trevor Lawrence, where I know some people, Jake, might just say there's no chance he's not going to be that generational talent that he was supposed to be. But then his run on receivers was really fun to watch as well. Xavier Worthy, Terry McLaurin, Jalen Waddle, Brandon Ayuk. Again, some value there for Waddle. People might be out on him because they burned him. He burned a lot of people last season. Same with Brandon Ayuk coming off his injury, but I thought he got pretty good value there for some of those guys.
Absolutely. And Stephon Diggs in the 13th round, another guy,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of concerns and question marks, but like if he is the target hog that he seems set up to be, that's tremendous value.
Exactly. And and Anthony Richardson. Like, I know some people are just like, don't do this. You guys can't talk about this. But if there is a world, this might be the last year we can say this, where Anthony Richardson does come out. I believe he is going to win the starting job, but he does actually just take that step forward. And Jake, the one thing with him is the rushing upside. Like he got him in the 9th round. And if Anthony Richardson's able to even play half the season for him, we know the rushing upside and what that brings, especially in a super flex draft. I thought that was a really solid pick as well for his third quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the rushing guys, Jackson Dart went much earlier, I believe, at the
Yes.
start of the 8th round. So those two guys are very comparable to me. So to get Richardson, more than a round and a half later, I'll call it a great value.
There we go. Everyone's doing great. Our drafts are great, Jake. We're going to continue bringing up this draft because, like I said at the beginning of the show, everyone cares about our startup Dynasty League. So that's what we're going to continue talking about. But appreciate everyone hanging out with us today. As always, make sure you go give us a follow and make sure you go to fantasylife.com. Check out all of the articles that we have there 100% free. Sign up for that newsletter in your inbox 7 days a week, 100% free as well. And we will see you here next time.